I know you've been really active with Newsmax and everything else and talking about different things. Just give us a little rundown. I know you've been on before, talked about your book, talked about different things you experienced at NYPD and ultimately over in Baghdad. So glad to have you. Talk about a little bit about what is going on in the world of Strom.
I appreciate you having me back here, Juette. It's a pleasure. I mean, just been talking about some topical things. You know, there's been a lot with the Nancy Guthrie case. There's been a lot with transgender shootings, and sometimes I'm available and sometimes I'm not available. But I enjoy going on this show, and I guess I bring a perspective that they appreciate. And there's been times when I've been on with some of their other guests on the panel, and so that one person would give their opinion, somebody like myself would give my own opinion, and most times we generally agree. Like I'm on a lot with this one woman, Betsy Branther Smith, who was a Chicago area police sergeant, and she runs an organization called the National Police Association. So we're like really good friends. And then when this whole thing with Nancy Guthrie turned up missing, disappeared, murdered, we don't really know at this point. She actually lives in Pima County, Arizona, so she has some intimate fidelity and knowledge of both the sheriff and the sheriff's deputies that are working that case. So, but we were on. Sometimes we don't really know we're going to be on together, and you get the notification, hey, you're going to be on, and then they pair you up with somebody, and every time we go on, it's almost like I'm talking to you, really. Right. That's what it comes down to. Okay. There's such a familiarity, and it's a give and take. And most times when you do things on Newsmax, there's usually 2 questions per person. So if it's a panel of 2, it'll start with one person, then it'll finish with go to the next person, and it goes back and then third. But sometimes, depending on the time allotted for the segment, and dependent upon the person that you're on there with. I've been on there before with people that are just like hogs for the time.
They're like, I've listened to me speak.
Yeah.
I've got a lot to say.
And it's actually kind of comical because you see it coming because you know they're going to give that person the hook.
Right.
And so I'm actually gratified by that I have not, both of them getting the hook and kind of making kind of a jerk out of themselves, and me never getting the hook.
That's a good thing.
In terms of being able to share time and, be respectful of other people's opinions.
So let's talk about that just a second. I know you don't want to go into a lot of detail, but like, what is your take on that situation with the Guthrie lady? I
go back and forth on it. I'm of the opinion that she was never brought home. Recently, I posted something on social media, and there was some pros and cons. A lot of my cop friends from the NYPD said, no, I think she was murdered, or I do think that there was a home invasion that went wrong, and they stumbled upon it as she was being brought home. I'm very suspect of the sheriff because everything he says turns out not to be true.
Okay.
And there's been all the missteps have been pointed out by lots of other people way smarter than me. I always say I don't do crime scene. I do interview and interrogation. But having said that, I know from the beginning of that particular crime, whatever it is, whatever it turns out to be,
right?
I would have called in the experts to do that crime scene. I would have like shut everything down. They didn't do that, but I'm just looking at it. My opinion, and I just posted this recently on Facebook and also on Instagram. What if she was never, like, she was not brought back to the home? In other words, they know the intimate inner circle and the family know that there is cameras on the house. They claim that they went in through the garage door. The son-in-law dropped her off. And I'm of the opinion that they never brought her back home.
Okay.
I'm of the opinion that I believe somebody in their inner circle or the family did that. And the reason why I say that is because this guy walking up to the door, the Ring doorbell camera, it's like, who's doing a home invasion at night? This is an 84-year-old woman. But, he walks back, grabs some grass or whatever it is and puts it on the camera. It just doesn't seem very deliberate or intentional. And I did recently a podcast interview with Allison Maloney, who works for Newsmax, but now she's branched off and she's doing her own podcast called Unscripted with Allison Maloney. And that was my opinion then, and that's my opinion now. But after the post came out, like getting back to my NYPD friends, some were saying, oh, no, she was definitely killed, or it was a home invasion gone wrong, or maybe there was an altercation in the house. And I'm like, it's good to have a debate about it, but nobody really knows. They're not really releasing too much information other than the fact that there appears to have been a struggle, that there appears to be blood both inside the house and outside the house. But, in the interview I did recently with Allison Maloney, I was like, I would love to know both Nancy Guthrie's pattern of life, and I would certainly want to know the inner circle of family's pattern of life, because they're saying, well, we went out to dinner and then we took her home. And I posted on Facebook, well, when was the last time you did that? In other words, notwithstanding that particular
night. Is this the only event?
Right.
Is this the only time that you've ever brought her back home?
Yeah, brought her back home. Or what's your frequency in terms of, going out to dinner? Is it once a week, once a month, only on special occasions like a birthday, anniversary, or whatever it is? And of course, they're not going to reveal that information to me. But the fact that would be where I would start. I would start right in the center and work my way out. And apparently they did try and do that, but it's not working out so well for them.
I think one of the things that people don't realize is I think people do not realize, the general public doesn't realize that there is never one track when we work cases. Everybody has a different track. And to me, it's like, okay, here's 3 possibilities, 4 possibilities. Let's prove or disprove them. And eventually the evidence is going to point to what happened, and that's the track you end up running. And I think people lose sight of that. They get distracted by the glove out in the middle of, on the side of the road and this and that. And it, just like I always am amused by the DNA stuff. It's just like, oh, it's magic. And then they come out and go, it's actually going to be like 4 or 5 months before anything happens. And it's just like, the sad part about it is you have an 84-year-old lady and, somebody that people care deeply about, and they can't find her. And that has to just weigh on you greatly, on the family.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, like, again, I do interview and interrogation, so I would love to get this person in the box and just
give me 3 suspects.
Yeah, just give me any 3, and I'll take compliant, non-compliant, compliant with information, non-compliant with information, and we call it sorting, sources and things like that, and just have at it and just work it. And I'm sure that was done, but I'm also equally sure that because of the sheriff and he was pro defund the police. He was anti-police, defund the police. He supported defunding the police. He's not a Trump fan. I'm just putting that out there. And I only know this because of my friend Betsy.
Okay.
This is inside ball. I wouldn't know it any way, one way or the other. But her opinion and some of the things that she shared with me, I think that the inner circle, meaning the family members, people that would have a reason to be there, maybe the house cleaner or gardeners or whatever it might be, were treated more like victims than suspects. Oh. And that's her opinion, and I happen to agree and share that opinion as well.
So talk about that real quick with your vast experience with interviews. You never get a chance to do the first interview, do it over, do you?
No.
So when you do an interview, if you don't get that information fresh, what happens?
Well, then people lawyer up. I mean, in a situation like this, and again, I don't know. Again, this is only my opinion, but I believe it only because I said this before on Newsmax, and I said it also with Allison Maloney on her podcast. Who benefits from this? This woman is 84 years old.
Right.
Who's going to? I mean, okay. Theory number 1: somebody broke into the house. They killed her. Well, I can't recall anyone that got killed in a home invasion where the body is taken with them.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's that I don't believe. Okay. If it's a kidnapping, where is the ransom demand? I know there is 70 some odd miles between where her home is and Mexico, so there could be a possibility of something like that. But that time has come and gone. In other words, I've got the body. Here's the proof of life. We cut her ear off. Or we have a video of her saying, please send money or whatever it is. Right. And then they introduced this thing with Bitcoin. And I said in one of the interviews, I can't remember which, I don't know anything about Bitcoin. I don't own Bitcoin. Right. I wouldn't know how to transfer or wire somebody with Bitcoin. I've probably written less than 100 checks in my whole life between my wife and I. Right. So I don't know anything about that. But so that seemed to be like another theory that's come and gone. Right. So now the question is, we go to the trouble of a home invasion, hypothetically. Okay. We kill this woman. What's taken? I mean, maybe she had some valuable jewelry and things like that, but you're going to take her and then we're going to have to feed her, house her, or whatever, going on the premise that she was kidnapped.
Well, not to mention with their pacemaker, and she has medication and everything else, it's not like you're going to be able to keep her alive in any way, shape, or form, and there's no quality of life to try to keep her alive. I mean, the clock is not working for you at that point.
It's more of a problem than anything else. And again, I can't ever recall where somebody was abducted, especially at that age, because I read something online where percentage nationally, they make up less than like 5% of people that are actually kidnapped in an adult or somebody that's has medical complications and things like that. So what are you left with?
Yeah.
What are you really left with? And then the fact that we're finding gloves 2 miles down the road. I mean, I'm like, again, going back to my friend Betsy Brantner Smith, who lives there. She says, you can't believe the amount of gloves you would find on the side of the road because it's a very transient community. There's a lot of contracting workers that are there. That glove resembled that glove. I mean, it's just, again, we're going to all the trouble to abduct this woman.
And then we're going to check.
But then we're going to discard things that could definitely link me to this crime on the side of the road instead of just going to some
random dump site.
Yeah, some dump site, or burying it or burning it, or going to a McDonald's and lifting up their dumpster and throwing everything in their wholesale. I mean, none of it makes any sense. None of it really makes any sense. So.
Well, I don't know. Like I said, I think one of the things I would like to say in that and experience with law enforcement is the sad part about our job is depending on who's in charge and what resources they put, if they don't put their very best, I think people would be disappointed to know how much it depends on the initial officer, because whoever comes in and starts that is going to decide really what the outcome is going to be, unless somebody intervenes pretty quick.
Yeah, somebody's got to take charge. And again, getting back to, I do interview interrogation. I don't do crime scene. But I'm smart enough to call in those resources and say, hey, I need help with this, right? I wouldn't let my pride and ego get in the way. And obviously you wouldn't either.
No.
But again, that one opportunity, now that ship has sailed, now what are we going to do now? How do we salvage this?
Yeah.
And this crime could actually go unsolved, depending on who committed the crime. We don't have a body, so there's so many challenges with this case. It's unbelievable. And it didn't have to be that way. You could have locked people into a timeline. And even if they said, well, you know what? I don't want to talk to you. That's fine. You don't have to talk to me. But I would be doing research, which I'm sure they are doing, with forensics, cell phones. So I mentioned this in the interview I did with Allison, pattern of life, cell phone usage. For me, I never turn my phone off. I might put it on silent because I don't want to, if I'm in a meeting or whatever the case is, depending on the setting.
Right.
But my phone has never been turned off since the day I bought the phone.
Right.
Okay. So just for argument's sake, let's say the son-in-law's phone, and I'm just using him as an example, or the sister or the daughter's phone, suddenly it's turned off. It's never been turned off before, but that day it's turned off.
Right.
Or 2 days before, where they normally have anywhere from 25 to 100 text messages every day. And of course, I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know you know all this stuff. And suddenly their pattern of life changes. That's how you create, that's how you have information when you go in there with your first interview and say, hey, what's going on? And lock them into that statement, whether you have the information or not. But now they're locked in, and now you've more information is coming in, and the digital footprint and the forensics, and now you're like,
I think that's where we fail in law enforcement, is the collection of information, because we get lazy. We go in there and we're like, all right, these are the sections that I need to cover for my report. They don't understand, like, have a conversation, like a pretty clean conversation of like, hey, well, what have you done for the last 24 hours? I think I'm always impressed with these guys that like do like interviews like you do and stuff like that. And you start itemizing what they're doing, and they have that gap, or they go in and they talk, I went for, like boom, boom, boom. They have all their time straight and everything else. And then the time where everything occurred, they're like, I don't really remember. Or they've lied so much. And then, then that's where it gives you your opportunity to go in there and start attacking their story.
Yeah. I mean, at some point in time, even though, and again, this is important too, and I know you know this, but for your audience's benefit, you have to separate people. You have to separate them right away.
Right.
And if they say, well, I want to be in there with my wife, or I want to be in there with my husband, I'm like, yeah, not today. Not today. And if they're insistent upon it, well, then you know what? I don't know if I would interview them.
Right.
I would probably say, hey, you know what? Let's try this again tomorrow. I would try and work an angle where I wouldn't have to interview them, together, because obviously their husband and wife, brother and sister, other family members, if they've rehearsed this story, if they're involved, again, they may not be involved. I'm not saying they are.
But you can, I think the other thing about that's really cool is if you take two people that are both telling the truth, their stories aren't going to be exactly the same, but they're going to intersect enough where you're like, okay, we can move on.
Right.
And I think that's what you lose on the people that are not even involved in stuff. If you haven't locked them in very well, and then then with all the media attention and everything else, like, are you really getting clean information at that point? Yeah. Probably not, because we're all influenced by the information that we get. It's not like, hey, tell me what you did the last 48 hours. What do you know about this? All that's gone and out the door because they've given them so much time to be exposed to all these different things that you don't have clean information coming in. I think one of the coolest things about your book is talking about, like, you go in there in Baghdad and you're doing an interview and the guy's like, I don't have anything to tell you. And then your boys are out there like searching and they're like, actually he does. And then they present, and it's amazing how that changes their life. It's a religious experience at that point. So talk about that. Like, I've enjoyed that, but talk about like what it's like when you go in there and you're fresh, you're having a contact with somebody, they're lying to you, and you're like, all I need is that one piece of information.
Yeah, well, we use what you call logic traps. You use psychological manipulation. You use other statements from other people that contradict that. So, for example, the story in the Guthrie case is they went out to dinner. Well, I would love to be a fly on the wall at that restaurant and speak to the wait staff, the waiter, the waitress, if they ordered drinks, a bartender, the maitre d' that brought them into this restaurant. And again, they don't have a dog in this fight. They have no reason to not tell you the truth. So what time did you get there? So I would exhaust him. I would exhaust those people until I couldn't think of any more questions. And I would walk out of the room and I'd be like, Juette, what did I miss? Is there any more questions I could ask this waiter or waitress that I missed? And go back in there again. Again, they don't have a dog in the fight. So as you say, they have no reason. It's clean. They don't have a reason to lie about that. But if they tell me, yeah, I looked at them and while they were having dinner, he was constantly on his phone, right? Well, was he on his phone, talking on his phone? Was he texting on his phone? No, I think he was texting on his phone. What about the daughter? What was she doing? Oh, she was just sitting there. What was their facial affect? What was their body language like? Were they having a good time? Were they laughing? What was this? Did you overhear any part of their conversation? Anything? Just right. Any little piece of information that I could turn around. And now, if I'm actually, fortunate enough to actually interview the son-in-law or the daughter or whoever, you
already have like a video in your mind of what dinner looked like, and that way your questions are not just like tossed out there randomly.
Right, and it's only dinner. What car did they come in? I didn't see the car. Do they have a valet? I'd go talk to the valet guy. Oh, he came in a blue Ford pickup truck, 4-door. Who was in the truck? Who was driving?
Right.
The wife was driving. He was driving. Anything that you could pick apart the story just to like break them down. And again, as you know, and from doing this, let them just tell the story uninterrupted the first time. Tell the whole story.
Engage with them and let them tell you.
Let them, and like, don't question them. Don't change your facial expression. Don't roll your eyes. Just let them tell the whole story.
Yeah.
And then okay. So I just want to ask you. So you were driving the truck? Yeah. I was trying to. Oh, okay. Because I talked to the valet guy, and he said your wife was driving the truck. Oh yeah, you're right. My wife was driving the truck. Not a big deal, but it's just something now that he's going to obsess over now,
right?
Because he knows that you've done your homework, right? And so then it just whittles away down, and again, that's very basic, but that's where I would be starting from, because again, I would also ask, have you ever seen this family before come to your restaurant?
Right.
Oh yeah, they come all the time. I've never seen them before. How long are you working here? 10 years.
Right.
again,
you get a better idea of what.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's basic stuff, and I'd like to think that that's what they were doing there, but nobody really knows because they're very.
So what do you know about the story? And maybe you don't, but by being on and talking about that, there was something that I heard where apparently one of his search and rescue pilots was grounded because the sheriff was mad at him or something like that. Did you hear anything about that or no?
I did hear that. I did hear that they called for those resources and that it was denied. Is that factually accurate or true? I don't know. I heard the same thing, but I don't know if that's true or not. But it could be.
Yeah, and if it is, that's a big loss,
Well, and the crazy thing about this sheriff is apparently, and I found this out I think it was Sunday night. They did I can't remember the company that did it. It's called Desert Law. So basically it's like,
an association of.
No, it's, like cops, like they did like ride-alongs with the Pima County Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
And the title of this series is going to be called Desert Law. And I can't remember the name of the company. It's not. I don't know if it's sort Netflix or.
It's sort of like Cops, but it's
right.
in the desert.
But it's them going on jobs and it's profiling different officers. Yeah, I always wanted, and they're doing ride-alongs. I always wanted to be a cop, and they're responding to the calls and stuff. But the funny thing is, that's this department. That is this department. And again, they filmed this last summer, so it's 6 months already done.
Okay.
But it's just how ironic is it that
be interesting to see how that pans out.
They're interviewing they're doing ride-alongs with the very department that's in charge of this whole investigation.
Yeah.
So
well, I don't know, like I know we're going to spin around really quick, but I think one of the things that you're saying is that it's analytics, it's taking information, collecting information from people and coming up with a answer or at least a direction to go on a case. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is it seems like we've had some mass shootings involving people that were in some way, shape, or form transgender. And I feel like it's such a volatile issue. I feel like people get canceled. You got comedians that get kicked off stage for saying stuff and everything else. So what I'd like to do is just from an analytical standpoint, just from what you've seen and what you've heard. And we actually had somebody on, a grandmother of a child that was in a situation where she was transitioned without permission and things like that. Just talk about I know let's talk about the two shootings that we know about that were committed by somebody that was in some type of a transition. You had the shooting at a hockey rink, right? And that was in New Hampshire, correct?
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island,
yep.
And then you had the shooting in British Columbia in Canada, and it was the same situation. And both of them were fairly young. Well, no, one was young, one was in their 40s, I think. Right. And so just talk about that. Like when you look at that, I know you're really interested in safety for kids in school. That's why you came back into the law enforcement profession in the first place. But from your standpoint, what does law enforcement, being aware of the fact that this is something that is really important to a lot of people, how do you have that conversation of I understand it's important, but let's be honest, this is not a great example, but it's something that we'd actually talked about earlier together with some of the people here, which is what we know about people that are victims of sexual assault. There are things that they do as a result of that. They're cutters. They have all these different things that they are involved in. So what do you know, and what can you talk about as far as transgender people and shootings involved?
Well, I think there's many problems. One is the person that wants to transition. Everybody, in this room has been a teenager at some point in time. A lot of these, as you mentioned, some of these children have been victims of sexual abuse, sexual assault, broken homes. They've experienced any number of kinds of trauma. It doesn't have to even be sexual. It could be domestic violence. It could be alcohol abuse, drug abuse, broken homes, brokenness. And so they're very unhappy and depressed. And so usually that's where the medical profession comes in. They're like, hey, what my child is very depressed, doesn't like school, has been online looking at graphic videos in terms of these violent video games that some kids play or whatever. He's had suicidal ideations, whatever it might be. So depending on the doctor and the doctor's school of thought, the doctor should be treating that symptom.
Okay.
The doctor should not be encouraging the child, who is a child, not an adult, in this conversation, that we have to fix you. We got to get you in counseling. We got to get you maybe on some medicines that will help you feel a little bit better about yourself. What we're finding out now is that there's been in the school system now, shifting from the medical profession, that the counselors that come in contact with these children are not involving the parents, which to me is outrageous. Because the school counselors call the parents, as you know, if you have children, for anything that they do wrong in the school in terms of
if they give them an aspirin, they call the parent.
Right, they're notified. His grades are suffering, but the fact that this child is wanting to become a boy, or go from a boy to being a girl, or from a girl being to a boy, the fact that they wouldn't include the parent in that conversation. And I'm not saying all schools do that, but some schools do, and we read about it all the time. But you're now switching back now to the doctor. Now we're going to have a doctor involved in this process, and he's going to tell the parents, because this is what has been happening more often. Well, your child is depressed. He would probably feel better about himself if he became a woman, or if he became a man, and we should, seriously consider that. And by the way, if we don't do that, the child says he's going to kill themselves. So they wholly, as a parent, when you hear that, your heart goes out and you're like, well, oh my God, I don't want my child to kill myself. But I think that information and advice from the doctor is completely flawed, because I don't think they're treating the symptom. Okay. I think they have a mindset and something that they subscribe to that they believe is right, but that's not the common wisdom of a social worker or a psychiatrist that would say, hey, no, let's look at the underlying problem. This is an adolescent child, and they go through a lot of experiences and a lot of hormonal changes.
But what I always wonder about is, like, as you walk through these shootings and you analyze them, what is the common denominator other than, I think mental health is one of them. It's not just, and I think that's one of the things is I think people want to like grasp on one thing and go, okay, well, it's because of this, but and I mean, I guess it's politically incorrect, but is the transitioning and stuff like that just a symptom of people that are, going through some type of mental situation or something? I don't know. Like,
in my opinion, again, I'm not a doctor. I believe that it is 5 years ago, it would have been classified as gender dysphoria.
Okay.
A medical psychological condition. It's not normal to want to do that. It's not normal. And people, when we have this conversation, we're talking about children. These are children at 14, 15, 16 years of age that want to change their body. I mean, nobody has the wherewithal. We have adults that are in their 20s and 30s that don't have enough wherewithal to make good decisions in terms of things like that. But yeah, we're going to allow a child to do that. We're going to allow medical practitioners to say, yeah, that's fine. They don't need permission from the family members. They don't have to be included in this. We're going to give them SSRIs and other kind of estrogen or testosterone agents and introduce that into an adolescent child. I mean, it's just, to me, it's like, that's not the Hippocratic oath of the medical profession. Do no harm. We're not treating, again, back to, it's not treating the symptom.
Right.
We're just trying to pacify this person because I want to do this. And it's funny, I remember seeing Bill Maher, and I'm really not a fan of his, but I saw a clip of his on social media where he said, he was against all this transition surgery. And he said, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a pirate. He goes, and I was 12 years old. He goes, does that mean I should cut off my leg and put a peg leg in and pull one of my eyes out so I can wear a patch because I want to be a pirate?
Right.
Because the same kind of logic should be applied to these children. They can't make these kind of decisions, especially when they're in distress the way they are. They're not in charge of their emotions at this point at this stage of their life.
But I think that's what I think is the most interesting part about it is that I think about children that have to get parents' permission to get piercings, all these things that involve their bodies, but yet you have this magic, okay, I want to transition, and then every other rule to me is thrown out. And I don't understand that. I don't understand, and I don't know how you have a conversation that says, okay, we accept that. Like there are people that genuinely feel like that, and that's perfectly fine. I don't think anybody wants to target these children and say, hey, you're really jacked up or anything else. But like, I do think it's important, instead of like jumping to something that extreme that is like life altering. It really is, because I did read about a lawsuit about a girl that had a double mastectomy, and now she's 20 some years old. She just won the lawsuit because, and what's kind of funny is when you read it, the different websites, one website will say, like the one that are more for the trans, like it was the Trans News, they were saying, well, like this isn't precedent or anything else. It was just that psychiatrist was not equipped to deal with a child that was in transition, and that's why they won the $2 million lawsuit. And I think it's really dangerous when you say, okay, they just weren't, like, are we really going to get that specialized when a symptom of struggling mentally is to think, okay, do I want to do this? Do I want to do this? And I guess I don't know. I don't know how you work through that to a point where you have people that, I just don't know why it's such a militant and such extreme on both sides.
My body, my choice, this whole thing. And I get that. When you're an adult, again, if that's what you want to do, I mean, I feel bad for you, because I feel like there's something wrong with you. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying that to be mean-spirited and say that, well, I'm making fun of somebody. I feel like there's something wrong with you that you would want to change your body. Totally different from sexual orientation, that you're a man and you like men as opposed to women, or women, you're a woman and you like, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're something that's so life altering that there's no coming back from this. And, as a child, I don't think that they should be allowed to make that decision. I had to get my parents' permission to join the Marine Corps at age 17.
Right.
And then we've had this conversation, and thank God they did. But that's a whole lot different than changing my body.
Right.
From being a man to a woman, or vice versa. It just doesn't make any sense.
I just wonder if you could get to the point of having a conversation with the other side where you could say, hey, let's make it a starting point. A starting point in this conversation is, let's accept that if somebody is to the point where they want to change their gender, they are struggling, and this is a big decision that could possibly go either direction, bad or good. To me, it's like, let's pump the brakes and say, hey, let's have a conversation. What is the rush, in my opinion? What is the rush to get the surgery, to get the medication and everything else? I don't understand why that is such a rush.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And again, I think there are some states that are trying to pass legislation in terms of a minimum age that you can actually even discuss this with it. There's hospitals that are losing funding over it.
But that's what's really weird about where we're at with politics is, I think it was the Federal Trade Commission. They're in a battle too, and all they're saying is like, well, it's because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the cause of all this, and I think maybe at some point it's not like, I listen to both sides, and it's not, we're really not that extreme. There are fringe elements of both sides, but I don't think it's unusual for like the middle to sit there and say, that's a really big medical decision to make. That is extreme. I don't think anybody would say it is extreme to go from one gender to the other. I don't think too many people would be like, that doesn't seem like a big deal. That's like an in and out procedure. It doesn't seem like it's that significant. I mean, that's huge.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I don't understand is the rush to get them to that point. And like, I think one of the things that I always think about with the country that we live in is people complain about it, but there are checks and balances. And I'm married to one, but I'm not a fan of attorneys for the most part. I know some really good attorneys, but I think that's the other thing is we legislate things and then we have interpretations of it and everything else. And I think one of the problems with that, with the legislation and everything that goes with that, is it is a good thing to have an attorney that can file a lawsuit to go, hey, you need to pump the brakes. You're going to pay $2 million because this child should not have had a double mastectomy and have a life-altering decision made. Allow that child to make that decision as a teenager. And I think that kind of rattles it back and and makes it better. But I I don't know how to have that conversation with people.
Well, and I think you brought up an interesting point. On the one hand, we have a medical doctor that's willing to do this procedure, a surgeon, I'm assuming. On the other hand, we have other medical practitioners like psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, and whatnot. They may or may not even be involved in this process. They may go straight from my child is depressed, they see a doctor, and they want this procedure. And again, depending on the school of thought with the doctor, maybe he bypasses. And again, I don't know. Again, I know what I know. I don't know enough about the medical profession. But it seems to me that there has been some missteps in terms of where the doctor, the surgeon, is making that decision, and the psychiatrist or the psychologist is removed from this picture, where if this child is 15, 16 years of age, that there should be a mandatory counseling session of X. I don't know what X is, 6 months, a year, or back to the age. You're 18, you're an adult, you can buy, we have limitations on alcohol. I mean, and again, alcohol, we have limitations on voting, age and things like that. Limitations on going into military. We don't want to have a limitation when we're talking about a 12, 13-year-old child, where we're supposed to assume that just because they're upset or they threaten to kill themselves, if we don't allow them to have the surgery, or the doctor is telling the parent, back to what I said before, if you don't allow your child to do this, they're going to kill themselves anyway. That's like, well, do I put the gun to my head now, or do I put the gun down and let my child put the gun to their head?
Right.
With this medical decision.
Right.
I mean, it's like it's a zero-sum game of this whole process.
I wonder what people from the other side would say the solution is. I mean, I think the friends would say, this is something, these children have a right to do this, and so they should be allowed to do it. But what does the other side say? And realistically, is it really not that big of a deal to the general public? I read something that said the Democrats are choosing this as a issue. Most people don't think it's an issue, and they don't want to deal with it. Unfortunately, you have parents, you have an end result, which is, and I always think about the conversation people talk about with guns is with guns, they're going to kill somebody, you're going to kill somebody with a gun. The gun just picks itself up and starts firing it, indiscriminately. I think that's an interesting conversation when you think about, I don't remember who it was that had that discussion, but they said, how many people were killed last year with drunk driving? Mm-hmm. Should we ban alcohol? Should we not let people drive cars? If that's the end game, which is to prevent, tragedies like that occurring, and your solution to prevent that tragedy is take the guns, and then let's take the cars, let's take the alcohol. And when you start putting it in that perspective, it does change. It's oh well, maybe that's not the direction we need to go. I don't know. From your standpoint though, as far as people that are not, I don't want to say target or anything. I want to be really careful with how I say it, but from my standpoint, when you look at school shootings and being in that environment, so we get off the trans stuff a little bit, what do you see in what you do day in and day out, and what you read about with, school shootings in general? What is a reoccurring theme that when you look at it and you walk through where you're at and you're going, okay, I need to pay attention to that. Not because I'm targeting that person. It is I need to extend some type of outreach towards that person because they possibly could be in a bad situation. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe the answer to the whole trans thing is I don't want to say embrace. But more than anything, go, that person's struggling. And because they're struggling, as a human being, I need to do something that makes them feel like it doesn't matter what you're going through. I just want you to know that I'm here.
Yeah, I think teachers are probably the first ones to see that because they interact with the same students day in and day out. I think teachers are in a tough spot, having worked with teachers now for a couple of years, depending on their relationship with the principal, with the counselor, things like that, coming forward and saying, hey, pull this kid out, just talk to him for a little bit, because that's where the start point usually is. And sometimes because of privacy issues, I'm not made aware of that. Sometimes I stumble onto it on my own. And if I ask, not getting too deep into the medical interests, but just from a safety perspective, they're usually pretty forthcoming with me. Getting back to the trans community, if we are under the assumption that these people make up, and when I say people, I don't want people to jump all over me and say, like, I'm labeling them as just people. I'm talking about this group, this segment of society.
People that identify as
people that identify as transgender, they make up a very, very small segment of society. But the statistics of the shootings and the school shootings make up a huge portion of the school shootings. So you can't, on one side, be looking at statistical information and accepting it, and then on the other side dismissing it, because that's where like we had this conversation the last time. That's where the analysts come in. If the analysts are saying this, and this is what it's pointing to, just like in sales, if you're trying to sell something,
right,
you're trying to narrow the market of who wants this product. We're trying to narrow the field of who commits these crimes, and we have narrowed it down. When you say that, now it's like, oh, you say that all nobody is saying that. But it's something like, we're getting back to what your question was. We got to be aware of it. We have to look at these people, and again, in a loving way and in an understanding way, and trying to figure out what we can do to help them in life, get them more counseling. Because again, there's always signs. You mentioned this the last time we met. There's always someone that says, schoolmate, teacher, counselor, pastor at a church, friend that's a coworker or in the study group with them in the school. Yeah, Tommy was.
Who's struggling?
We saw this. We saw this coming. We were, but people are afraid, and they shouldn't be afraid. They should come out, not in a mean-spirited way. We're not talking about being mean,
singling people out,
but saying, look, like as you said, I love the word struggling, because they are struggling. They're struggling emotionally. They're struggling for any number of reasons that we all struggle in life. Everybody thinks that we just became adults, and it was the golden road, and everybody just threw palm fronds on the ground for us to make sure we got where we needed to go. This is part of life. Life is success, failure, heartbreak, emotion, death, relationships, all kinds of things. But these kids are experiencing it at a pivotal point in their life where the emotions are just rampant at 15, 16. I mean, I remember myself. Being 15, 16,
and we didn't have access to the kind of information these kids have. I mean, I think that's the hardest point is that, like, they are so connected to the world around them that, like, we were in like I don't want to say a bubble, but to a certain degree, like, if somebody said like, oh, this is happening over here, you're like, I've never seen something like that. That's not even familiar to me. And I think that's a big difference. And I think, like, for me with these kids and in general, it's just, I would say, and I don't know if you would agree, but I would say with the blanket statement, anyone that engages in a mass shooting is struggling. And it's just trying to figure out why they're struggling and preventing it. And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations I have with our occupation of law enforcement is we're really good at, like, turning the lights and siren on and responding. Like, why can't we do a better job of, like, preventing? Like, why don't we apply the resources before there's a problem?
And I agree with that 100%. And I think the parents know that if you're a parent, you know your child better than anybody. I mean, you see a different side of them. You see them at home versus at school. Everybody has a different persona depending on the social setting and their environment.
Right.
And the Sandy Hook was like, I mean, that kid was struggling up in Newtown. And they knew it. And the mom bought, her answer was, well, let me just buy him an AR-15 and take him to the range because, of course, that's what he likes to do. My understanding from my recollection, parents were separated, kills the mom, goes to the school, shoots all these children up. I mean, it's just, and then I believe, if I remember right, he killed himself. And that's what's happening a lot in these school shootings and I'm not saying he was transgender. I'm talking about the signs, people struggling. I don't want to conflate the two. This kid was clearly struggling. The mom knew it. The school knew it. He had intimate knowledge of the school because he went to that school. I believe the mom worked there in some form or fashion. So, and he's mad at the world, maybe because the parents are not together, whatever. But if my son, and my son is an adult now, was struggling, the last thing I'm going to be doing is buying him a firearm.
Right.
The last thing I'm going to be doing. In fact, if I have any firearms, I'm going to make sure they're locked up in a safe place so that he can't have access to them. Doesn't mean that you've eliminated all possibilities for your child to still, do some self-harm. But at least that part you took ownership and responsibility for.
So in the schools and in general, I think that's the other problem is I think there's such a disconnect. I know you're bouncing in my brain, so welcome to my world. But I was watching earlier today, them talking about Minnesota and providing services. I mean, it's a totally different thing, but they were talking about all the fraud and everything up there. And I think that's one of the problems. And I think one of the things that we might be able to pave if we could ever get to the point where we communicate. The other side, the left, loves programs. They love programs. Why in the world do they not have a program that actually helps kids and people that are struggling with this? Not to like rush them to a bad decision, but like, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's figure out whatever resource you need and help you do it. Instead of saying like, okay, and I'm not saying all that side does, but it does seem that like that group, they want to separate you from your support system, your parents. I'm going to separate you from your support system. And I'm not saying like there's a lot of situations where parents aren't the advocate, but like the schools should know that. The schools should know like this kid plays sports, and I'd like to see the percentages on that. How many of these kids are involved in activities? Yeah. That would be one of my curious things. And like my recall of all these kids are not. They might be in a little clique, but they aren't involved in the schools.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think a big part is the social media influence. I think that's where all these people meet. And if you're already miserable in life or upset with your lot in life, and you find a group where people are like, hey, you're right to feel this way or whatever like that, that's who they're engaging with. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but, it's harmful. Social media can be an addiction. I'm sure these kids are spending too much time, and there's been statistical information that bears that out, that, the kids that don't play sports, that don't engage in real conversations, put the phone down, take the phone away. There's issues with that. And then we find that they're in these chat groups later on, where there's some pedophilia activity that's going on in there. They reach out to these kids. Oh no, you're normal to feel this way. And so there's so much danger out there.
Yeah. And that's what happened with the young lady that her grandmother came on and talked about her situation. And that's exactly what happened is the counselor put her grandchild in touch with a group that like feels and thinks like you think. And next thing you know, she'd been trafficked out of the state. And, I think that's the hard part. The hard part for me is that you have all the statistics, like you said, the analytics say this. It's just, but it doesn't. Nobody wants to listen to it. It doesn't seem. They want to mourn the loss, but never correct it. And I think that's the biggest problem I see is you have these horrible situations, and I think people don't think about the trauma of being in a safe place and watch somebody you care about, or you don't have any training or any experience in life and you go to a hockey game and then you see people getting shot. And we both know what that looks like. I mean, the movies have gotten a lot better of how they show it, but like the trauma and actually seeing that, people are seeing way too much and they're exposed to way too much. And I think that's stuff that shows up years from that and it's not something that usually people recover from, unfortunately.
No, I agree. And you try and channel your energy into different things, but you're talking about children at a hockey game. Like I said, they should feel safe. They're there with their family, they're there with their teammates to have fun. And again, in the Rhode Island shooting that we're talking about at the hockey game, the wife said, I divorced him 2 years ago. This was a long time coming. They saw it. Everybody saw it. Everybody knew it. And this is an adult. Again, We're not even talking about an adolescent child or somebody that's maybe 16, 17 years old. This person was 40 some odd years of age. Mm-hmm. I mean, and killed his children.
No.
I mean, if that's not a sign of mental illness, I mean, it's bad enough to kill a stranger. Like, okay, so that's terrible too, obviously. Yeah. But to kill your own children?
Yeah.
That to me doesn't make any sense. I can't, my mind can't go there. I can't unlock that door. It can't go there.
Well, I don't know. I know there's no magic solution for any of this, but I think one of the things, light is what helps. That's what I think about COVID. But one of the things that they said is like, get outside, like instead of being cooped up and everything else. I just wish people would stop having such hateful rhetoric towards each other and like, oh my gosh, you said this or you said that. And I think everybody at some point engages in that, but like it doesn't, like you said, you get on these chat rooms and you think, hey, I'm normal. Like everybody hates this. No, they don't. They really don't. And I think the leadership that we have in general is not doing a great job of like, showing a pattern of like, oh, this is how you have a civil debate. And I think that's one of the hard parts about it is that, but I understand. I mean, when you think about it, it does make sense because you have like, there are people that regardless of what Donald Trump does, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be like, oh, well, he's a horrible person. And the flip side of that, what they don't understand is what happens because of that is they're on the defensive. And so like, if they make a mistake, they should, but what would happen if they admit they made a mistake? They would be like crucified and it goes both ways. I think I don't know. I just wish that people would be able to have honest conversations where they're not so volatile, I guess, of like, hey, we can agree to disagree. We might think different. So along those lines, I'm going to throw you a curveball for the last thing. I've had a lot of conversations in law enforcement about the PBA and all the things that are involved with that, endorsing our new governor here in Virginia, and with all the laws that are coming out with the General Assembly's coming out with also talking about like changing redistricting, all these different things. And when I think about that, I think about what you're dealing with, your friends were dealing with in New York. You have somebody that comes in there and promises the world, and then he gets there and he realizes like, not only can I not hit my minimum standard, I am going to have to do everything I said I wasn't going to do to reach to that. Tell us what you know about New York and like, hey, we can give everything to everybody. Holy smokes, we can't do anything for anybody.
Well, let's start with the police department. This year, 20 years ago, so that would be 2015, 2016, they hired 4,000 police officers, biggest academy class they've ever had.
Okay.
All things being equal, those people probably, I would say, overwhelmingly, those people, depending on what their position is in the police department, are going to leave. So you're losing 4,000 people. When this guy Mandami campaigned, he was for defund the police, hate the police. Everybody knew that. Of course, he was pandering to the white liberal audience.
Karens,
all the Karens and all the Upper West Side and East Side people in Manhattan, like, oh, he's a great guy. He'll be wonderful because we hate the police too. Yeah. So he was singing their song. But I think he genuinely hates the police. But I don't want to get off track. So he changed from that. He pivoted and said, no, I better be pro law enforcement because there was enough of a metric that if I didn't say that, I might not have won this election. Okay. So they used some analytics and they did some polling. So getting back to what you were saying now about monies and things and, pipe dreams and things that can't be reached, the class of the 5,000 that they were going to bring in, and I spoke about this on Newsmax, actually with Betsy, probably back in November of last year. I said, let's just say for argument's sake that he does hire these 5,000 people, right? You're losing 4,000. The net attrition rate for the academy class is anywhere from 15 to 20%. So you can knock off almost 1,000 people from the 4,000.
Okay.
I go, that's assuming that. But you're still not keeping up with not only the 4,000 that are leaving, but the 400 that are leaving every month after that. That's the normal attrition already. Right. So you're going to be, but now he's not able to hire these 5,000. So you're going to lose 4,000.
And why can't he doesn't have the money?
He doesn't have the money because the mayor before him, who was really
He was a cop, though.
He was a cop in name only.
Okay.
Believe me when I tell you, there's a lot I could say about him I'm not going to say. And I want to make sure I don't get you banned from YouTube for some of the things I could say about him. But
not a fan. But you could say you're not a fan.
Not a fan.
Okay.
He spent more time suing the police department along racial lines because, of course, he was disenfranchised, got promoted to captain, which is another story in and of itself. But he spent over almost $6 billion. They had him in front of Congress. There's a videotape of him. $6 billion to house illegal aliens in New York City. $6 billion, which they didn't have. So they blew through the budget. And of course, they did some manipulation with the accounting. And so in fairness, and I don't want to even stick up for this guy for 1 second, he inherited a budget that was already a $5 billion deficit before he even took the oath of office.
So it's safe to say, despite what anybody says, there is a negative effect to us, to the general population, and in particular New York, for illegal immigration.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
They created a $5 billion B with a B net negative,
right,
to support that program.
Right. So they've frozen all promotions. They've eliminated all overtime. No hiring. Right. So again, you can't imagine what it's like to go to work every day. And now there's more videos popping up on social media that show the doxing of New York City police officers, where these people will intentionally get up in their face, be confrontational, say all kinds of vulgar things, trying to, get their YouTube moment. But more than that, they're identifying the person. And then after they go back and download the videotape, they're like, this is Chris Strom. He lives at 123 Main Street in Salem, Virginia. And saying, oh, and he's married and this is the car. So they're actually doxing now the NYPD officers in New York City.
I don't think people appreciate how screwed up it can be, like the level of violent people you deal with in law enforcement. And I'm always amused by people thinking, why does ICE wear a mask? Go look and see what happened in Mexico, what the cartel will do. Mm-hmm. Like, if you don't think there are violent entities out there, you might be just a Karen that likes to stir stuff up. But like, you are actually putting somebody who is a public servant in harm's way by doing that. And the same thing with what you're talking about in New York. Like, it's one thing for us to come to work and deal with what we have to deal with at work. It's something totally different when they drag our families into it.
Yeah, it's completely out of hand. I feel for the cops, but the flip side to that is that segment of society doesn't change my opinion about law enforcement or your opinion about law enforcement. Right. It's still a great career. It's still a noble profession. And there's plenty of other places like Florida, like Texas, like Tennessee and other conservative states that really appreciate law enforcement. And they show that both with community interaction, they show that with special privileges, take-home cars, financial incentives, promotion tracks, and things like that, where they are actually appreciated. The NYPD was for me, and again, I had an amazing career, and I say that not because I think I'm amazing, but I'm saying that I was afforded the opportunity to do so many different things. I spent 13 years in plain clothes. I wasn't fooling anybody doing undercover work. Believe me, I'm about as white as you can get with blonde hair and blue eyes when I had hair. But I went from doing anti-crime to a robbery unit to working in a narcotics unit to working in the intelligence division. There's so many things that you can do, and it's such an exciting and rewarding job. All that stuff, when you're on patrol, when you're the foot cop in Times Square that you got to put up with these lunatics, that's just noise. That's temporary. So hopefully we get around that. But you mentioned something about leadership. The leadership has to support these people. When you tell them at some point in time, you're standing too close to me, take a step back. If I make an arrest for disorderly conduct or impeding pedestrian traffic on a sidewalk, I want to know that the sergeant is going to support me for this arrest. Right. Not that he's going to throw me to the wolves and say, no, we're not backing you. Okay. And so you have to be, make sure you're on steady ground with all that. I didn't have that issue. We didn't have cell phones with cameras in it. We told people to move, and they moved because
they knew what is it that you said? I'm going to ask you. Yeah. And then I'm going to tell you. Yeah. And then I'm going to make you.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and I think that's the difference. And I don't think people realize what law enforcement represents in a civilized society. They don't, I think people in a perfect world, they're like, well, just like all the ICE stuff, they're like, well, you know, she was just out doing this. No, she was like, you're in the middle of a volatile situation. There are things that they could have done differently, but at the end of the day, the only person in that whole scenario that made a decision that put them there were the two victims of those shootings. Those agents did not, they made a decision based on what was happening to them. They did not, and I think that's the hard part that people don't understand. And I think what I would say to people is, like, what every single person that has been shot by law enforcement had in common is they weren't doing what law enforcement told them to do. I don't think it, and maybe somebody can call in and tell me it's different at some point, but I cannot think of a single instance that I've seen in my career or watching videos or anything else where somebody was doing what they were supposed to do and law enforcement shot them.
And you know, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I look at that Minnesota police chief and he starts crying on TV, and then he's telling his department, the whole world, if ICE calls for help, we're not going to help them. I was on Newsmax, and I said, and actually it was my friend Kathleen Wynn, and she has a radio show in Arizona, and we were talking about the call for help as a police officer, right?
You drop everything.
My blood is boiling hearing this from this chief in Minnesota. I don't care who you are. If you're calling for help and the chief says, yeah, if you go, you're getting fired. Well, you know what? Fill out the paperwork now. Yeah. Because I'm going. And so is the guy that's sitting next to me in this radio car. We're going. So you're going to be busy because we're not going to not help somebody calling for help. We help complete strangers calling for help. Right. We don't make decisions on whether or not they really need the help or we like or dislike them because of whatever reason. These are police officers calling for help. They had checkpoints in Minnesota. Are you ICE? Let me say. And then as a civilian, like, I'm just trying to imagine myself driving home to my house, right? Are you ICE? And some Karen is standing there with a clipboard and taking pictures of my license plate.
So here's my question. What does that remind you of?
That's like Gestapo tactics.
It reminds me of Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they did.
Yeah, like a shakedown. Like you're going to shake me then? Yeah. But that went on. That
they allow it. They allow it, and they'll push it as far as they can push it. What would you say the percentage of people that are like that extreme towards ICE and law enforcement in general? You know, it's in New York. The percentage is probably way more than like places like New York, Seattle, Portland, and things. But do you think it's any more than like diehard? Like, hey, they need to, like, not the people that are like, ooh. I'm talking about the people who are like, these people are evil and we need to be rid of ICE and everything else, and law enforcement sucks. 10%?
I think that's fair.
In New York.
I think that's fair. It might even be higher than that. I think that's fair. I really, really do. Because even before all this was going on, before ICE and everything else, anytime there was a police shooting, depending on who was doing the newscast or who was doing the reporting, police are bad. Police are bad.
No, I remember that.
And if there was a racial component that they could attach to it, all in on that too. White guy shoots a black guy. Never a black police officer shoots. And again, I had this conversation. I can't remember who I was having this conversation with, but it was during an interview. And the guys, we were talking about, you know, the racial influx in terms of police interactions and things. And I said, the idea that a police officer would go out in New York City where the composite of and the demographic of the NYPD is 52% white, 48% other in terms of ethnic and racial backgrounds. Right. And the whole gamut. And, you know, the idea that you're going to go out and selectively just pull over black people and your partner is black. Yeah. Or the people you work with on the platoon that went out that on the 4 to 12 that wouldn't notice that was something that you had a proclivity for. I mean, it's outrageous. And then moreover to say, well, he shot me because I was black. I'm like, no, I shot you because you had a knife in your hand. I told you to drop the knife and I shot you. Right? And this is what just happened recently now with Mandami. He's not even 3 weeks into his administration. Thank God for the body camera. The police come. It's a man in distress. I believe it was his mom that called. I think you may have the video was pretty prolific. It was all over the place. Drop the knife. At one point, they pull the door closed, and then it seems like he retreats, and then they go back in, but then he comes at him, and they shoot him. He survives, but the mayor, Mandami, is at the bedside
of the victim.
Of the victim who had a knife, who was trying to stab the police officer. And you can't even make this up because, again, this is what he wants. The police are bad. You know, I went from defund the police. I'm going to hire police. We can't hire the police because we have a budget deficit. But I'm going to stand at the bedside.
Now I'm going to demonize the ones that stayed.
Wait, it's coming, and I'm not wishing this on anybody. I don't want people to misinterpret me. Wait until there is another legitimate shooting where there could be a racial component attached to it, white on black, black on white, whatever. It could be an ethnic, could be religious or whatever. And the cop is killed, unfortunately, in this violent officer-involved shooting. And now there's a funeral, which we've all seen these funerals. I can't even tell you how many I've gone to, right?
Right.
It always seems to be like a crappy day where it's raining and snowing and all this other kind of stuff. And this guy tries to show up for that.
I know I'm aging myself, but what was the one where there was a mayor up there that nobody in the law enforcement liked, and he came up there and tried to say something, and the whole rank and file did an about face and faced away?
I was at that funeral. It's funny you mentioned that. Was Ramos and Lou.
They were ambushed, correct?
They were sitting in
was
a car.
Was it Dinkins?
No, it was
what mayor was it?
De Blasio. Bill de Blasio.
And they all about faced and are like,
I was at that funeral.
Okay.
I swear to God. I went to that funeral. In fact, I talked to the pastor at my church, and he came up to me and he said, "Oh, that's awful about what happened in New York." And my blood was boiling.
You're like,
I'm like,
I'd like to really tell you.
Because President Obama weighed in on it too.
Yeah.
He weighed in on this too. Again, attaching a racial. So you have a Spanish fellow police officer. You have a Chinese first generation. I think it was Chinese or Vietnamese. I'm not sure. Oh, his wife was pregnant. The Chinese fellow, Lou. They're sitting in their car, minding their own business. This guy apparently drove all the way up from Maryland. I'm going to kill a cop. He had announced it. Gets up there, shoots them. They're sitting in their car. It's not even that they had an interaction with him where they stopped him on the street, pulled him over for
They
a
did
traffic
not initiate contact.
So getting back to my pastor, I trust, he goes, "I think you should go." So I go. And I'm telling you, I saw the Jumbotron and he's in the church and everybody just turned around. And there were people on Fox News, I'm not even going to say their names, that said, "Oh, that was disrespectful," to include Dan Bongino. Okay?
Oh.
Yeah, that was disrespectful. Again, you don't have a dog in this fight.
No.
Okay? You were a cop for a whole 5 minutes in the NYPD. Then you went to the Secret Service. Then you ran for Congress. Then you got promoted to assistant director of the FBI and quit after 10 months. Don't lecture me about being a cop and what's appropriate protocol, because you have no dog in this fight.
No.
None at all.
No. Well, like I said, it is an interesting times that we live in. I appreciate you coming on. It's always great to have you here.
I love coming here, man. So
it's awesome to have you, and I appreciate it, and hope everything goes good for the school year, and we go from here better.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.